Welcome to the class that coronavirus can't kill. So let's get started talking about cooperative strategies. I'm going to tend to refer to these always as alliances. Technically, it's more correct to say cooperative strategies, I suppose, because it's more inclusive. But usually when we're talking about these things, we're talking about alliances. So I tend to just use that commentary to make it easy. So we're going to do the same thing we've been doing for all of these classes. We're going to talk about why they're done, how they're done, and then the things that go wrong with them. The basic logic of creating an alliance is that you want to share something or you want to gain access to something. And so if you go back to the concept that we studied in chapter 6, this is all about creating economies of scope, sharing, leveraging additional resources and the like. And so the textbook term is to build a relational advantage. In other words, I'm able, through my relationships, to tap into something that another company has. But I want to get one of the markers down right up front, and that is the key to make this thing work is trust, respect, and transparency. In alliances that don't possess these qualities, they're usually short-lived and unsuccessful. The long-lasting, successful alliances, these are the hallmarks of those relationships. So, in the English language or in the American culture, we have a cliche that says, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Well, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to shout at me through the internet so loud that I will hear you all the way to my computer when you actually say, oh, that's exactly, I see the point. This is about keeping your enemies close to you. The textbook has a very long list of reasons why people do alliances or why they engage in cooperative strategies. What I want you to see is they're basically the same as the reasons that companies pursued mergers and acquisition strategies. And so alliances, if you will, are an attempt to get many or all of the same advantages from a merger and acquisition sort of arrangement, but without the costs. And so the idea is if we use the mindset of rent versus buy, if a merger and acquisition represents a buy, like you own it, you're responsible for it, it's yours going forward. An alliance is more of a rent thing. If I can keep this for as long as it's working for me, and as soon as it's not working, well, I'll just go find something else. Let me illustrate this to you in this chart. Now, this is what I talked about to show mergers and acquisitions keys to success. And so, talked about synergy. The advantage of an alliance is if you find that the synergy is not there, it's much easier to unwind. Don't overpay. Well, in many, not all, but in many of the alliance strategies, there's no acquisition premium whatsoever. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, I'll tell you later that equity alliances tend to be the most successful alliances, but even then your investment is much smaller. Keep it friendly? Well, by definition, there's no such thing as a hostile takeover alliance. The alliance partner has to be equally desirable to go forward with the deal, so by definition, it's friendly. Getting it done, typically because the scope of involvement is less, the negotiations are less to establish an alliance. And in terms of integration, well, now you're not having to integrate the whole, you're just going to have to integrate the pieces that are involved in the alliance, and so that becomes easier. So these are the theories why an alliance is superior to an M&A deal. At the end of the presentation, I'll tell you why, though, sometimes an M&A is the better strategy. When we talk about the specific types of strategic alliances, there's the notion of a joint venture. And this is, if you will, a couple getting together and creating a baby. The baby is an independent entity, so a joint venture is about combining some resources to create a separate company, and almost by definition, you have 50-50 ownership. Is it possible to create a joint venture with more than two companies? Sure. Typically, you see that, again, they have equal ownership. Then you have kind of the sliding scale, and I don't exactly like the way the textbook discusses it. They talk about equity alliances as though they are joint ventures without equal alliance shares or without equal ownership shares. And I think that's true. An example of that is a company that you're very familiar with, and that's Hulu, which actually has had different owners at various times. But when Hulu was kind of growing, you see who owned Hulu. These were a lot of the major TV companies, and they didn't own all equal shares. So that would be an example of an equity alliance. What the textbook doesn't talk about here, but is also important, is that many times in alliances, companies will buy shares in each other. So they might say, okay, we want to do an alliance with you, and we are going to buy 10% of your stock. And okay, that sounds good, and we will in return buy 5% of your stock. So the companies actually have equity ownership in their partner or partners. And honestly, those are the ones that tend to work the best simply because companies have more skin in the game. But then you also have the non-equity alliances, and those are where no money changes hands. Can get confusing because, like, well, is it just a contract or is it an alliance? So I contract with another company, say, to sell me some of their product that I will then use in my product to go forward. Is that a contract or is that a non-equity alliance? And I would say you can make a case for either way. The more that there's a sense of continuing, that okay, I'm going to buy these parts from you now, and I'm probably going to buy these parts from you going forward, then it becomes more of an alliance. If we begin to cooperate on things, if we begin to share information, then it becomes more of an alliance than strictly a contractual relationship. But I'll be honest with you, that's kind of the low end of alliances, and that low end can get pretty blurry, and that's okay. In the next video, I'm going to dive into the why of alliances.